Hey folks, this is Jeff Styles again, and this is our second El Doso 2 video podcasts of Storyville. The first one, In Search of Adamant, turned out to be wildly successful. We found Stuart Goddard, Adamant, and we got all his stuff back to him. If you didn't see that, go check it out. Every Storyville and Rockyology that we do here, we being me, Nuga's own Jeff Styles, my buddy Jason the Argonaut, who produces these shows, they're all archived at fredpodcast.com. Fred, like the name Fred, podcast.com, and you can check it out. Now, this one is called In Search of Half Cocked. In Search of Half Cocked. And the reason that we're searching for Half Cocked is because of a question that was asked by my news director, a young guy named Russell Stroud. You'll be seeing him in just a second. And, well, I'll let you kind of just listen to his explanation. We kind of wrap up the reason for doing it twice very quickly in the very beginning. But this short film stars moi, Jeff Styles, written, directed, produced, and starring Jeff Styles. Also starring, wait a minute, don't go. Barry Corder, longtime entertainment editor for the Chattanooga Times Free Press. Barry Corder making his return appearance to Storyville's video podcast here. And introducing, this time, Suki Hawley, and Michael Galinsky, who are the writer and director of this movie about punk bands in 1994 touring in a sort of triangular circuit, Chapel Hill, Chattanooga, and Louisville. And they did a black and white, low-budget movie that got rave reviews from the critics called Half Cocked. And also introducing Russell Stroud, my news director, as the
wide-eyed young news director.
Wide-eyed young news director. It says so right here. Wide-eyed young news director who asked the original question. I'll shut up and just let the whole thing start going here. Russell Stroud, news director at Nuga Radio. What interested you in this topic, this little-known black and white movie?
Well, I was looking up the band Polvo, which did a song called Can I Ride that I'm a pretty big fan of. I looked that up, and on Wikipedia, it mentioned that they were in a movie called Half Cocked, and I just looked at the movie. Media article had said that it was filmed in Louisville, Kentucky, Chattanooga, and Knoxville. And obviously we're in Chattanooga, so that's what piqued my interest. I looked it up and watched the trailer, then I watched the movie, and I thought it was really good, and not a whole lot of people heard about it. Artistic endeavors, but I'll just start off where I started off. I was reading about the band Polvo, and I saw that they had a song called Can I Ride, which was featured in a movie called Half Cocked. Now, I was born in 95. The movie came out in 94, so I'd never heard of it. And I looked it up on Wikipedia, and it said that part of it was filmed in Chattanooga, which intrigued me. I'd never heard of this movie at all, so I looked it up and watched it online. Wow. And I thought it was brilliant. Wow. That was very good.
Yeah, he's my news director here at the station. I'm a talk radio host, and he's just got very eclectic and esoteric taste, and has an ear for punk, and started with, obviously, just as a kid, just hearing stuff and picking it up, and went down the rabbit holes and chasing the Cramps and the Misfits, brought him to you guys.
We'll take it. We'll take it. We'll take it. Well,
Hey man, this is so
Jackson, that's the transmission fluid.
You gotta check that too.
When the car is on, you check the transmission fluid.
Turn that shit on.
Just check the oil.
Tired when he went on tour, meeting all these people, but it was mostly a southeastern tour circuit at that time. I don't know if you want to talk about that, but we were super inspired by Tennessee bands, by Louisville bands, by bands even in Chapel Hill, obviously.
Played at this crazy basement club last night. It was fucking great. The van broke down and the guy who towed it fixed it and then told us about the show and got us on the bill.
Whoa, God, watch out. Wait a minute, we gotta put some money in the meter.
Fuck a bunch of parking meters, man. We don't have that kind of money.
Well, and that's, certainly people don't think of the South right off the bat when they're thinking punk, and the more hardcore, the less they think about it. We've obviously got the monolithic Southern bands, a lot of country, twangy, crossover Americana stuff. But I mean, like I remember my daughters, the same age, a little bit older than Russell, were very much into a local band called The Unsatisfied, who had a huge following around here. And they had places to go all the time. Right. House parties,
right.
Yard field parties, clubs I didn't know about. Maybe I didn't want to know about them. I don't know. But did y'all have a route in Chattanooga at the time?
My question.
We haven't had a show in 3 days. We sold a couple t-shirts to some passers on the street. They're like, we don't have any money. It's really kind of scary.
What's really intriguing to me and what's interesting and incredibly connected is I grew up in the South, right? So I grew up in Chapel Hill, which is not that dissimilar from Chattanooga or Knoxville or Louisville. I mean, it's a little different, but it's the same. I went to New York and I started a band. And growing up, I was inspired by all these local bands. I went to see shows when I was a kid. I was part of, at the edges of a scene. And it gets even more intriguing, but I went to New York, and you mentioned this whole conversation started with this idea of this Polvo single. Well, that Polvo single was incredibly meaningful to me as well, because a friend of mine in my dorm in New York gave me that single and said, hey, I think you'd like this. And I did not really pay that much attention, did not realize it was from Chapel Hill. They were playing at CBGB's. I went to see them. And the first person I saw was a girl I'd known since second grade in Chapel Hill. I was like, what are you doing here? And she said, I live in a house with Ash, so I came up with these guys, which just was so crazy.
Hey, look, I told you, all look. Man, they're gonna be back here in a second. I'm serious, come on.
And at the same time, Superchunk had just came out with a single. And, my last name's Galinsky.
Yeah.
Superchunk, the drummer's Chuck Garrison. His locker was below mine in 7th grade. So it was just all these weird connections, and that was kind of something that totally inspired us as well.
Started playing these shows so we could make money so we could eat. It was like this big romantic adventure. And it's not ending. We're not eating, we're not even a fucking band.
Because 2 summers before, I'd driven across the country to take photographs in malls. And it was a horrendously awful experience. I would go to a town, know nobody. I would go to a mall, which I absolutely hated, find some junk shop, maybe a thrift store, and we'd sleep on the side of the road. And it was just a really alienating experience. I did it partly thinking, it'll be like on the road. We'll meet all these interesting people. Nobody. We were totally isolated. We started to hate each other. It was a nightmare.
If there's any way I can go back.
When I did this, we drove to a town where we would meet people, the exact people we'd want to meet. We'd find them through that thing, and then we'd get free beer, maybe enough money for gas, And it was just incredible. So the first few shows were great. Then we pulled up behind the Snake Snatch Lounge in Knoxville. And we pulled into the alley and there was a truck parked there. So we had to back up in front of the truck. And on the back lift of the truck were Sean, Barbara, John Brummett, and Tom Snively. And I took a picture of them. Sean took a picture of me, and we became inextricably linked forever. I mean, like literally, it was this incredible show where this other band from New York called Versus came down, and we kind of knew them. We all played to each other. There was probably 15 people there, but the woman who ran the Snake Snatch, Jackie, was just an incredible soul. She paid us, even though there was no money coming in. She gave us all our beer for free. And then a guy named Tommy came in from the pizza place next door. And she asked us where we were staying. We didn't have a place to stay. And she said, well, hey, Tommy, you want to put up a band? And he said, well, how many? And she asked me, 12. So we all stayed at his house, all of us together. And then the next day we went to Nashville and stayed with Jonathan Marks. And we walked into Jonathan Marks' house and he started talking because I hadn't arranged that. That was from Richard from Versus knew about him. And I was like, I know you. And it turned out he had a radio show in New York called the Tennessee Border Program that we listened to every Sunday that played all this great country music. But I recognized his voice. And then that was the movie. So, because those guys were from Chattanooga, when we decided to make the movie, it was like they became the Chattanooga base. Louisville, it was the Rocket House. And in Nashville, it was Jonathan Marks. That was the whole movie. And it all came together in those 3 days.
Oh, can I get some of that whiskey?
Yeah. Hey, man.
Pass it around. This place is amazing. It's beautiful. Take all our friends from out of town here. We gotta keep moving though.
Where are you gonna go?
I don't know. Maybe Knoxville. I mean, we have enough money to get there. We can probably get a show. Yeah, what about Tom?
I do have a friend there that sometimes puts on shows. Could probably hook you guys up. But I don't know if you should be riding around in that stolen van. You could trade vans.
We can't trade my parents' van.
Look, I know what you're saying, but I could have it painted. I could keep it off the road for a few weeks until shit cools down.
I've never heard anybody's story start with being a dirtbag mall photographer. That's a new one. And then you become.
It turns out that Michael is the only one who participated in photographing malls.
Yeah.
He's the sole dirtbag mall photographer that we know, but then drifts into
It is true.
literally drifts into the world of touring punk rock musicians, and of course, pretty much I imagine borderless, boundarless, ruleless existence on the road.
Yeah, except it wasn't that borderless and it wasn't that ruleness. You quickly figure out the rules and who you talk to and how you act, and you become part of a community. So communities all have their set of rules, and those rules don't have to be confining. And in fact, that's what's so incredible about that community.
Let's do it.
And are you sure?
Yeah.
Yeah, don't worry about it. I'm gonna keep it.
Hey, man.
Stay away from the man.
All right, you too. Bye, everyone. Let's go.
Take it easy, man.
Truck stop. Let's
Be careful.
go.
Take good care of your store, man.
You're gonna be
Yeah.
rocking.
Man. All right, you guys, man.
You're gonna be an awesome drummer.
Man, you are too, man. Man, that's
And I think about this a lot because I think about how much I think a lot about systems, and I've just always been like I wasn't a mohawked leather jacketed punk. I just could not stand systems and how they created limits to enrichment. And the thing about this community of punk rock, et cetera, is yes, there were forms that people stuck to, et cetera, but mostly it was incredibly expansive. And here's a perfect example is Slint. Slint is a bunch of creative kids in Louisville who are like 14 years old and changed music by recording in a basement and not really having any expectation and not trying to be stars. They were just wildly creative kids who came up with a whole new way of making music. That's kind of the ethos of that whole thing. Is like, we would play with bands that were so different than us, but it was incredibly inclusive.
Two things that I remember from that era the most were the community, like you just said, but also the DIY aspect of it. I mean, you created your own posters that appeared on telephone poles everywhere, found, there weren't clubs per se. We had one later, the Nucleus, but for the most part, it was a basement, an empty warehouse, wherever you could find. But it was very inclusive within that community. I remember that very distinctly.
Yeah, and the idea of zines, that people created zines
right.
to include people and but also to express themselves. It was such an important part of that whole scene.
Yeah, no, I said e-zines, but just zines at that time. They were printed 8.5 by 11, at the wherever.
Well, but that was the actual lifeline of communications, was the particular telephone pole in your neighborhood. There was always paper.
Yeah.
The side
that
of
was
that
the internet.
Yeah, that one side of the north side lunch where you could get meatloaf on Wednesday. You'd go out there and read the wall and see
But so, further to that, we're talking about this kind of weird intersection of culture where you have local cultures and then national cultures. And what tends to happen, just like in media, the bands on the coasts are the ones that move in and go across the country, and the ones in the middle have a harder time breaking out and making it. And it's weird, but it's true.
It felt like I was really experiencing a movement. It felt exciting. I felt like I was, you mentioned, I felt like I was really at the tip of a spear of something. And I ended up kind of disappointed that it never got bigger. Maybe it shouldn't have. I remember the moment when I realized that whatever I thought was going to happen with the punk movement wasn't going to happen. And it was UGG, A Music War. Do you remember that documentary?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that was, and I actually got the brand new VHS copy. I mean, I don't know how people were still paying $1,400 for VHS machines. I mean, I was so proud to have one. And I got my dad, who was a real music fan, to sit down and watch it. And he thought it sucked terribly and it was horrible. And the music was just god awful, which was a good sign as far as I was concerned, right? Because it irritated the adults at the time. But, I really thought it was going to take off. I thought it was going to be like No Nukes and be a bestseller and, this big compilation thing. And nobody I knew had ever heard of it, And I just thought, maybe
it meant a lot to me.
The movie kept your attention. Does it deserve that kind of accolade?
I think so, especially because I don't have a particularly high opinion of Easy Rider. I think that it is much better than Easy Rider.
It didn't age very well.
No,
I can tell you that right now.
No, as a millennial looking back at it, it's just like, okay.
What was up? Why did that start a revolution?
People were easy back then, I guess.
Are you a punk fan?
Yeah.
Just in general?
Yeah, in general. I mean, I like the Misfits, Black Flag, the average stuff.
How did you stumble into that music, being the age that you are? You're what, 25?
25. Short answer, the internet. That's it, really.
So you were probably listening to something that sounded much like it and then went back in time.
Pretty much. Actually, you know what? I can pinpoint it exactly. I heard one of the Misfits songs in the end credits for the movie Jackass. That was literally it. When I was like 12, I watched it.
It got your attention and you started chasing it down.
Yeah.
You were chasing down that T-shirt design.
Yeah, that was really what it was.
I knew that's what it was. I know that about you. All right. Russell, at your age, I was nostalgic for an era that I missed, which was, of course, the Woodstock generation. Mm-hmm. I'm growing up in the 70s at the time, remarkably rich musical environment with so much going on that now people look back on with longing. I thought it was boring. I thought I'd really missed the big scoop, which was the late 60s and the Woodstock Nation and all that. Do you look back on this era of punk music with a wistfulness or an envy? You can't have nostalgia because you weren't there. Does it seem larger to life than life to you in some way? Is it something you wish you could have experienced, or is it just intriguing from a objective perspective?
It's kind of both. I mean, I'm artistically interested in it. I'm not a musician. I could never be one, but I enjoy the music a lot, and I think that it's very good. I think that there is a certain amount of false nostalgia for it because it's something that I don't think could ever be replicated again. There's that sound that they made in that time in the early to mid 90s that really can't be done again, I think, because the attitude just isn't there anymore. And I think that that's the big part of it for me, is I resonate with that attitude a lot more than I do what's out right now.
The anger that drove punk, we talked about pivotal moments with these guys on our computer screens. The Clash came to America touring with Combat Rock. They played the Fox Theater in Atlanta. That was one of, I think, 3 shows before they broke up. Mm-hmm. And they had been declared the only band that mattered by Rolling Stone magazine. They couldn't have been any bigger. Success ruined them. It ruined them. They couldn't be rock stars.
Yeah. And I think that's the profound thing about this era that we're talking about with 90s punk and indie music, is that most of them never saw fame. They didn't get famous. So the art stayed, this is going to sound super pretentious, but the art stayed pure in a sense, I think. I think that that's what interests me the most in it.
And there you have it. In Search of Half Cocked, we found it. We talked to the people that were responsible for it, and I hope you enjoyed our little show. If you are ever interested in contacting us here at Nooga Radio, me, Jeff Styles, or any of the folks here that do these projects, you can, and you can do it like this. I used this, see, we're always cutting financial corners around here. We're trying to save as much money as possible so we can deliver the highest quality product to you, the podcast listener viewer. So I'm reusing this art card that said, "Hey, Stuart Adamant, we got your shit from last time." Well, we got his shit to him, so I'm just going to fold that down and say, you can contact us here. Pimp Jen, my boss, at this number, 423-635-3557. You can email us at nougaradio927@gmail, nougaradio927@gmail. And my own personal email, I'm not stupid enough to give you my phone number. Are you kidding me? But I will give you my email, jefeestanto@gmail.com. That's Hispaniola for Jeff is stupid @gmail.com. So contact us and tell us what's on your mind, and appreciate you watching.